just finished reading this book called Jesus and the Disinherited. It's written by this guy named Howard Thurman. It was written in 1949, and he's an African American. His grandmother was a slave. This is 1949, before the Civil Rights Movement and before, segregation was ended and all of that stuff. And he's this extremely well-spoken, intelligent person, and he's talking about the plight of Jesus. And it hit me for the first time. Jesus, the Son of God, God knew about him from the beginning of time. He knew that everything was leading up to him. God tells one big story, and we're all part of it. It's all one big redemptive story. And he could have picked for Jesus to have been born as a man any time in history, any race, any economic situation, but he picked for him to be a poor person in this very small ethnic group that was being oppressed by the Roman Empire, probably the biggest empire to ever roam the earth. It wasn't by accident. This was God's design, and it hit me. The gospel is for the disinherited. The gospel is for the people who are beaten down, the people who are voiceless. The gospel is for the uneducated people and the poor people and the people who don't count. And what hit me is, I'm not part of that. I think the gospel is for everybody, but it's not primarily for rich Americans, and I think we've believed that most of our lives. And 1 Corinthians chapter 1 is very important to me. It's been important to me since I was in college because it helped me with my faith, because I went to this secular school and I took a lot of philosophy classes, and I was made fun of for being a Christian, and everybody was constantly trying to debunk everything that I believed. But 1 Corinthians 1:18 says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God." But he goes on, Paul, as he's talking to the Corinthians, he says, "Brothers, think of what you were when you were first called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were of noble birth. Not many of you were influential. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. And God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And he chose the lowly things and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." So Paul's saying it's all about the disinherited. It's all about the poor black people in 1949 who have no voice, who are just this soulless race that's as good as a dog to so many people and Americans. And it's about children in Uganda. And it's about, people who are hunkering down in cellars in Burma to be able to pray so that maybe they can hide and not get killed. And God's just expanding my view of what this is all about. And I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, God, I see this is not right. Everything's not right. My perspective has not been right. The way I live is not right. But now what? What do I do? And I just feel like I see the problem, and I've got all kinds of questions, but I don't have answers. And I know I can read the Bible and I can tell you the life that God has called us to live, but I don't even know how to do it. I have so much stuff that it owns me, like we just got married, and when you get married, you get tons of stuff. People just give you stuff. People give you things that you didn't even know existed before. And it's like kitchen stuff. It's like apple peelers. Like I've always just peeled my apples, and all of a sudden you have an apple peeler. Like you need that. Like I've gone 30 years without that, but now I'm like, oh, I need that. Let's register for that, And but it's like, we basically, Brandy and I didn't have anything when we got married, and now our house is just chugged full of stuff to the point that like our lease is up in January and our house is kind of not good. Like we don't have central heat and air, and our kitchen's about the size of my armpit. But like, but we're like, we don't really want to move because we have so much stuff. And it's like, well, what if God is saying, I want you to move, and we're not moving because we have so much stuff? And what if God is screaming that at us and we don't hear him because we have so much stuff? And what if God's saying, you don't need a full-time job to provide for your wife, you need me. But I don't hear him because I'm too busy going to my full-time job. There's this part of the Bible that someone pointed out to us a few months ago, and I just can't get over it. And it's something so small that you could pass over it. Most of us have, and I've read it like hundreds of times and passed over it. But there's this part in Mark 11, and it's right between the triumphal entry when everyone's saying Hosanna in the highest and laying palm branches down, and the part where Jesus goes and turns the tables over in the temple. It's just these 2-3 little verses that are nestled in between, and it says, on the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. It's talking about Jesus. And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And then later, after he turns the tables over the next day, they're walking by, and Peter's like, look, that fig tree's withered. Okay, I'm going to read this sentence again. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. He found nothing but leaves because it wasn't the season for figs. Jesus was looking for figs on a tree when it wasn't even the season for figs. Jesus knew that it wasn't the season for figs. The reason I know that he knew it wasn't the season for figs is because he tells a parable about a fig tree, about when the leaves come and when the fruit comes. Any Jew back in that day would have known well when a fig tree was going to bear fruit, and it was going to be months before this tree was to bear fruit. So why did Jesus curse a tree because it didn't have fruit when it wasn't even capable of bearing fruit? And it's hit me that's so much of what he calls us to do. He knows who we are. He knows that we like our stuff, and we like our clothes, and we like to get more clothes, and we like DVDs, and we like, fancy cars. We like all this dumb stuff. I'm not even going to say it because I'm just going to sound like every goofy pastor that starts being like, we like drugs. Like, the stuff that you like. The stuff that owns you. God knows that. He knows what you're scared about. He knows everything. And yet he's calling us to do something that is literally impossible. He's calling us to bear fruit when we're not even capable of doing it. And the beauty of that is, in John 15:5, he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And to me, that's the answer, is I can't solve all these problems. I can't do anything. I can't even want God without him putting that desire in me.